Star Quest, which some of the elements of it are based on another game that I was creating, as I just said, called Dimensional Adventures. Let me actually set the materials up for it real quick. Alright, so the concept of this game is it's a board game fusion of Candyland and Monopoly, so where you follow along a set path, but you also try to collect items as you land on certain spaces. And it also includes a simple card battle system similar to Pokemon and other ECGs, although it's not quite as complicated. And players can learn about teamwork and practice basic mental math skills if they choose to, but of course, in the online game it calculates some of it for you, so not as much. The genre is action-adventure. The target audience is everyone ages 10 and up. And the number of players is 1 to 4. You can actually play this by yourself, which is kind of an interesting twist, I thought. The basic game flow is players move around the board and they follow the path by rolling 1 to 6 dice. And the graphics of it is kind of outdoorsy and has a bit of fantasy in it, but not too much. Gameplay progression is made, as I said, by rolling electronic dice and moving along the path. And as they land on certain spaces, they're able to collect these elemental stars and HP cards, which they use in the battle system that I'll talk about down below. And eventually, as they progress through the path, they eventually get to the final boss battle, and that's where they use most of their elemental stars and HP cards. The screen scrolls with the current player, but the card piles and stuff remain stationary, and the GUI displays some of the basic stats, such as the player name and the cards that you have in your inventory. The mission of the game is to basically just get to the end and try to collect as many powers as you can before you take on the final boss. There's not really any puzzles, but it was one of the categories on the outline, so it's there anyway. The objective is kind of the same, to reach the final boss before running out of cards. The playflow starts in the center here at home, and then they travel first across the inner path, and then once they get to here, there's kind of a circle that they can travel in, and then, as I'll talk about further in a minute, players can, once they get to this spot, the team can make a decision whether to keep going around the circle again, or they can proceed down the final path, which has more enemies and eventually the final boss at the end. And because of how the battle system works, players aren't actually playing against each other, but instead they're actually working together, moving around the board and trying to pick up special cards, and they can actually share them with each other to try to take on the enemies throughout the board. So it's kind of more of a teamwork thing instead of trying to get to the end first. Alright, basic setup of the game. Pawns are, this is of course for the online game, the pawns are automatically assigned to each player based on the player order. So player 1 would always have the same looking pawn, player 2, etc. The enemies deck and the final boss deck are shuffled at the start of the game, and then they're shuffled again when players go through the entire deck of cards. And they're placed on the lower part of the board, just below where the final path called Enemy Stronghold is. At the start of the game, each player gets 2 HP cards, which they need in order to battle, to endure the attacks of the enemies. The elemental star tiles are also placed on the board, and there's 4 separate types of tiles, and each one has a different ranking of power. So each one helps you out a little bit more in the battle system. There's not really any physics because it's a board game. It's just, you're kind of just seeing your piece advance, so physics aren't really applicable. You basically move along a linear path until you get to the center part, and then you go around in a circle until you make a decision, and then you go on the final path on the outside edge. The objects that are used are the elemental star cards, or the elemental stars that are collected, and you're able to use them to boost your attack in battle, and then the HP cards are collected that you have to sacrifice during battles, and the dice that you roll in order to advance. And the dice is also used to calculate damage as well. So for actions, of course you roll the dice to move, and as you land on different spaces, they have different effects and stuff. So that's basically the next 3 things. If team members get to the final space where they decide whether they go around again or they take the final path, if they can't make a decision on it, they have to roll the dice in order to decide who goes, what to do. So it kind of assigns a team leader for the decision to move on. And then the player gets to the final boss space, they have to wait for the rest of their team to show up. Alright, so this combat system, let's do that. As I said before, each player at the start of the game gets 2 HP cards, and which they need in order to defeat these enemies. But if there's only one player, that one player gets to collect 3 additional elemental stars at the start of the game to try to help balance out the difficulty a little bit. If a player lands on an enemy space, then a battle is initiated, and the player picks up an enemy card which has an 8 HP and defense stats on it. And after that, it kind of begins a turn cycle to where first the player rolls the dice to calculate their damage. So the first, whatever their dice roll is the amount of damage they do. And then after that, they can choose to apply elemental star cards that they may have in order to increase their damage. But they can only use 1 per turn from them, and they can also use 1 from each other player, so, but only if they use 1. So it's kind of like a 1-for-1 sort of thing. And then after your total damage is calculated from that, it then is decreased by whatever the enemy's defense is. So if you have like a 10 total damage, your enemy has 2 defense, then you're actually only dealing 8 damage. And your goal to defeat the enemy, of course, is to reduce their health to 0 during the turns of battle. Now, the same sort of system is used for the final boss, but their attack is a little bit different. And for normal enemies' attacks, they also use the dice, but the way it works is if they roll a 4 or higher, then the person who's battling loses 1 HP card. Otherwise, it's basically counted as they miss, and then the enemy loses their turn, and then you can attack again. So it's kind of like a 50-50 chance to lose an HP card when you're battling enemies. Now, final boss is a little bit more complicated because I wanted to try to balance out the difficulty of it a little bit. And here's an example of how one of the turns could play out, where if the enemy has 10 health and 1 defense, and then a player rolls the dice and they get a 5, then if they have an elemental star 1, they can apply +1 to their damage, and then since they use 1, they can also use 1 from another player, so then their damage would be 7, but it's then the enemy defense, which is 1, is subtracted out of it, so it actually only deals 6 damage, and then that 6 damage is subtracted from their health, so then they're left with 4 after that turn, and then the enemy rolls 4 or greater, then you would lose an HP card, and then it kind of continues like that. It's kind of a rinse and repeat sort of thing. And then this is just the explanation I covered. And then when you get to the final battle, the final boss has some different abilities to it. So if the final boss, if you roll a 1 through 4 for the final boss, that player represented by the number that you roll loses an HP card. So if you have, say, 3 players and you roll a 1 for the final boss, then player 1 would lose an HP card. If you roll a 2,